Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and thank you, as always, for being here. Good topic for you today that we all probably have an answer to. Here we go. Redditors. What's the most bone-chilling thing you've seen at night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This past Saturday, my girlfriend and I were at the scene of an accident between a sedan and a motorbike. We watched the rider passing away. When we got there, it was the entrance or exit to a major highway in Toronto. We saw a car facing sideways across the road, about half a dozen or so cars, all stopped. Quite a few people on the road by the car. There was a lot of panic and confusion. My girlfriend rushed out, and as she did, the crowd there moved the car back to reveal a person had been trapped underneath. Then I saw a man crying and yelling and pacing back and forth. My girlfriend called 911. She was the first to do so. A nurse who happened to be driving by had stopped to perform CPR. Cops finally arrived on scene, I guess about 5 minutes from our call, guessing about 10 minutes from when the accident happened. Paramedics showed up a few minutes later, and we left, quite shaken. About 2 hours later, my girlfriend's phone rang, and it was the police. They wanted to know if we had witnessed the actual moment of the accident. We hadn't. Girlfriend asked how the lady was doing, and that's when we found out she hadn't made it. The worst was watching the man at the scene, who was totally losing it. He was someone who knew the woman, and he could tell she was gone. I could hear it in his voice. Definitely something that will stay with me forever. Attempting this in order. When I was about 9, my dad was staying in a flat we own. He got horribly drunk. My mother is disabled, and my best friend and I stuffed wet tissues into the locks on the door, think those big keys, to keep him from getting inside. The main door was bolted and snibbed. Was sick in bed, heard a knock on the door, and the bell rang. Figured it was the post, and that they would leave a pickup slip. About 5 minutes later, I heard the sound of drawers opening in the spare room. Walked down the stairs to see a tall figure that was definitely not my wheelchair-bound mother through a crack in the window. Grabbed the heaviest item near me, a bottle of lotion that was like 1.5 liters, and screamed, "Who the F are you?" Have never seen a guy run so fast in my life. He broke a window on his way up because he forced himself through the gap he'd got in through. My mother has had surgery. Because she's physically disabled, she receives carers from the government. I'm really good friends with them. Anyway, one morning, the young female carer who does cleaning and stuff came in and said, "Your mother's just had 2 seizures. Turns out she had an infection and had gone septic. She was yellow and went to the hospital in an ambulance. Still came home the same day after antibiotics. That night, she found this orange pus coming from the wound and went back into hospital. Had the graft removed, but the infection was killed by the antibiotics. Mom couldn't remember either seizures, and if the woman hadn't been there, she could have easily died from septic shock. I was also told that I had flatlined. That was sort of scary, but not as much as the other incidents. Our house is also haunted, so." Well, I don't have any of these kinds of stories, but my father has a ton. Been a high-ranking police officer and a battalion deputy commander during the Civil War in my country. The first one is him going on a scene of a car crash. No survivors in the car crash. He accidentally stepped on the spilled brains of a baby that died in the crash. He told me that when he messed up a bit after that, because I was a baby back then. The second one comes during the war, seeing the incinerated body of his comrade. His truck was hit by an RPG or something, and he was engulfed by flames. Also the time when he was sitting on a porch and smoking a cigarette with one of his buddies when a sniper bullet whistled between them. There, and more, but don't have time for all of it. I too have seen the after effects of an RPG or bomb on a car with someone inside. Not pretty. I can't really recall anything terribly scary or creepy that happened to me, but my suite mate during my freshman year of college had an experience I would say was bone-chilling. He was a year older, and this happened the year before I enrolled. He worked the 24-hour desk for the dorm, and this one girl who was an RA and also worked there asked him if he could cover the rest of her shift so she could leave early. Pretty normal stuff, so he agreed and covered for her. She wasn't heard from for a few days, and eventually they found her hanging in her dorm room. He's pretty convinced he was the last one to see her alive, which I think is pretty dang creepy. Another incident that, again, I didn't witness this personally, but I know some people who were in the area when it happened. A little after 4 p.m., a student jumped from a building just by the Brickyard quad. It seemed super messed up to me because it was just after class change, so the area was pretty busy. Lots of witnesses, and I can't even imagine seeing that. To make it worse, my friend's girlfriend's roommate was supposed to meet him for lunch that day. but canceled for some reason or another. Apparently, she wasn't even that shaken up by it. Creepiest moment was the time I met a guy who thought he was Jesus before he realized he was just one of the final 2 prophets of the book of Revelation. I had just finished guest preaching one night at the church in East Peoria, Illinois. The church was small. I think there were 2 or 3 extended families, and that was about it. On a Sunday morning, there might have been 30 to 40 people. On a Sunday night, we're talking more like 15 people. Their pastor had died a few years back, and they had not replaced him, so they used people like me to fill in. I had a full-time job and was not a pastor, but I'd preach from time to time. One of the deacons gets up after I preach and says, "Thanks, Couch Jitsu, for preaching tonight. Anyone have any announcements?" Nobody did, but this one guy who was clearly a visitor raised his hand and said, "I'd like to talk with Brother Couch Jitsu." I'm thinking, okay, he had some questions about what I preached that night. We go to this little office on the edge of the sanctuary. Actually, I think it was more like a broom closet than an office, but there were a couple chairs there. He begins to tell me about how he needs to confess some things to me. I stopped him and said, "I'm not a pastor, I'm just a regular guy who preached tonight. Even if I was, this is a Baptist church, and so we don't practice confession like the Catholic Church does." Trying to convince him that there's no difference between telling me what he's about to say and Sister Sally out in the sanctuary. He tells me he understands and begins this long-winded story. At one point, he told me that the previous year he had been in OSF, the hospital in town, because he thought he was Jesus, but he realizes now that he's not Jesus. I'm thinking to myself, well, glad he realized he's not Jesus. He continues on for a few more minutes. He says that while he knows he's not Jesus, he has since discovered he's one of the 2 final prophets from the book of Revelation. Additionally, his cousin is the other prophet. He said this was confirmed to him because he was on a road trip as he approached the sign of the town, Prophet's Town. It started to snow. We continued talking for a little bit, and I gave him some advice, totally out of my league. We wrap up, and I walk back out, grab my wife and newborn daughter, and get to the car. We're heading down the bluffs, and it's fall or winter at about 7 p.m., so it's pretty dark. No other cars on the road for a while, so it's just us driving down the road. In every curve, our lights are shining on the bare trees. I feel like I keep looking back in the mirror. My wife asked me what was going on, and I told her. Her words were, he was probably just high, which I think was possible, or severe mental illness. Either way, at 24 years old, I was totally out of my depth. Not seen but heard was around 2:30 to 2:45 a.m. I was up playing video games. I heard this blood-curdling scream from the main street a couple of blocks over, then a woman screaming a couple more words I couldn't make out, then a car door slam and burning rubber as a car sped away. I called 911, and they said they'd come out and look at the spot. But if they sped off and I didn't see any details of the car or people, there wasn't a whole lot they could do. It wasn't near an intersection or cameras, sort of a rural area. I checked the news for missing persons over the next couple of weeks and nothing came up, but I know what I heard. Was exploring an abandoned psychiatric center with my friend at night one time. We were getting ready to leave, and as we were passing through the courtyard, so we were surrounded by the buildings completely, when we heard a noise in the bushes. Naturally, we went to investigate when we heard a grunt, but we couldn't tell which direction the sound was coming from because there was an echo. So we kind of start running in circles trying to remember where the exit was. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it at where I thought the grunt came from, and there was a man standing there. I almost peed myself. I screamed, "I'm sorry," and ran towards the exit. I said I'm sorry because maybe it was a homeless person, and I felt bad for invading his territory, but oh my god, I've never been so scared before in my life. There's a lot of stuff going on in some abandoned areas, so just be mindful and be careful and respectful. So apologizing was nice, but who knows? I was like 8 or 9 when this happened, super sleep deprived because at the time, Five Nights at Freddy came out and my older cousin showed me the gameplay, scared me to death. I was trying to go to sleep in my mom's room and I saw a tall, lanky silhouette walk around the room like nothing. It looked like its rib cage was showing, long, slender arms and legs with no face, and it was pure black. I basically pissed myself after I saw that and never told my mom to this day. When I was about 16, 10 years ago, my friends and I broke into this haunted house in the middle of nowhere. We weren't even trying to steal or be there long, we just wanted to be scared. There were rumors you could hear Native American drums in that area near midnight, so being kids from the suburbs, we thought it'd be fun or funny. We were just looking around at the house and all of a sudden we started to hear them. One friend looked outside and saw a dark figure in the backyard. We thought it was fake until we put a flashlight on it, and it was an actual dude just staring. I'm shocked I didn't shit my pants, but we ran so fast out that house. Didn't sleep for a month. About a year ago, I was hanging out with a friend, just walking around talking and whatnot. For context, my friend lives in a small community on a reserve. Anyway, it's getting really dark, and so we start to head back to the guy's house. On the way back, I see something hanging off a tree branch above head height. We get a bit closer to find out it's a freaking dismembered deer leg disconnected at the hip. We noped out of there fairly quickly, but had the pleasure of coming across another leg and some antlers hung of different trees, as well as a dead fox lying in the middle of the path. Not exactly sure what was going on there, fairly sure I don't want to know. A young deer, rushing in front of a way you were going 5 to 6 meters away from me. It was near my home, where I walk every single day, so I remember it pretty good. It was also just about 2 years ago or so. Mother effer scared the shit out of me, not only for being so sudden, but also because I was walking with my dog. And you know dogs, especially ones that are not from the city, they see something, they go after it. A silhouette of a child running and giggling on its own in the pitch black, without a parent seemingly, while I walked my dog at 2 a.m., upset tummy. Dog usually barks at anything at night, but was really calm and silent with this one. Quickly walked toward home, looked back and couldn't see the child anymore. Probably some hyper child whose own parents had late night dog walking needs, and I just saw the child, but creepy AF. My friends and I were coming home from a party, heading north on the 101 here in Arizona around 3 a.m. Saw a guy parked down on one of the ramps and walking up onto the freeway. He stood near a wall that dropped like 40 feet under the freeway. I was effed up and said something like, "And then he jumps and we see it on the news." And my girlfriend was like, "Shut up," and we all laughed. The dude jumped, died on impact. Apparently he was a transient with no ID, just decided to jump to his death. It was on the news the next day. Walking home drunk after a night out and a horny angry fox screamed at me from a bush. I near shat my pants and took off running, straight to a bus stop pole. Winded myself and ended up lying on the floor wondering if I was about to be eaten by some kind of demon. Arsehole thing just wandered off. What does the fox say? He says, "Why are you crawling along a pavement crying in terror, drunk man?" It's a bit off topic, but also on it, but this story, just reading it, reminded me of some old internet video of when that song was popular, and they had Morgan Freeman on like the Graham Norton show read the lyrics of what the fox said. You could look it up if you're curious. Kind of funny. Me and my 5 friends were packed into a minivan after getting pizza together in Chicago. An ambulance whizzed past us, and my friend, who was driving, decided to chase the ambulance on a whim. We rolled up on a gang shooting scene with 3 dead bodies, a lot of blood, and some bullet casings. The tone in the car changed real quick, and we went straight home. Once chilling in bed around 10 p.m.-ish, and out of my window I just heard meow out my window. My 2 cats were in my room, looked out the window, nothing. Brother came in asking if my cats were meowing at the door to be let out, but nope. Those meows lasted for like an hour. Then the final meow, Jesus, I can't explain it in words. A long and slow meow. Then poof, it stopped. Okay, this is a bit of an odd one, but I don't care. So once I was just chilling in the living room with my sister and grandfather, and then my mom asked me and my sister to look at the night sky to look for some odd shit. So me and my sister and my grandpa and my mom all went outside with binoculars and a telescope. We saw an odd glowing ball that had a bubble wrap texture. Then we saw what looked to be a plane, but it wasn't. It was an aircraft from a different planet of some sort. We saw one other of those 2 minutes later. Happened 2 years ago. One of my friends used to F around with a Ouija board, oh god, before I met him, and he used to tell us his house was haunted after he played with it. I used to go over to his house a lot and didn't believe him, but one day myself and 2 others went over and decided to see if he was telling the truth. So we played this little game where everyone sits on the bed, holds 2 fingers out, and count each finger. Now, this was just the beginning. We counted down about 4 fingers when all of a sudden, the bed started shaking violently like an earthquake hit or something, but the only thing that shook was the bed. Naturally, we thought that someone was shaking the bed from underneath, but the space between the bed and the floor was maybe like 8 inches off the ground. After the bed shaking, the TV turned on its own and started flipping channels randomly. Then later at night, something flew from the closet and hit me in the face.